That's right, the India Business Conference is back for its 18th edition, this time focused on the theme Rewiring India for the Future, Driving Resilient Growth. Columbia Business School is bringing together 20 plus of the greatest minds in Indian business. This conference is your chance to hear about how organizations are navigating today's economic uncertainty and mapping a path to sustainable growth. Join me in welcoming Suvarna Gupta, a second-year student at Columbia Business School, and Kartikeya Kumar, also a second-year MBA student at Columbia Business School. They're both part of the organizing team for the India Business Conference that is organized annually by CBS, the largest student-run India-centric forum in New York. Welcome to ITV Gold Studio.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So exciting. So how excited are you guys for this in-person conference that will be the first in-person conference in 3 years following the pandemic?
It's going to be one of our biggest efforts yet. For the last 4 years, it had been online because of the pandemic, and it's just not the same feel. You don't get to network and speak to these speakers in the same way as it is if it's in person. We're pretty excited about the lineup this year, and it's been a thrill organizing this with our team of more than 20 people who have been doing this on the back end. So we're excited to meet people in person. We are flying down speakers from India for this, so it's going to be a pretty exciting ride.
Yes, absolutely. It's as Suvarna said, like this is the first time it's happening in person for the last 3 to 4 years, and virtual, as good as it is, virtual simply doesn't have the same feel. So being able to get together all the attendees in the same room along with the speakers, I think that's something that we're really, really looking forward to. We are very excited at the lineup that we have put together, and we are very excited about the conversations that will happen there.
And I was looking at the brochure. You have like a new campus that's come up, right?
Yes. Manhattanville is the new location for the business school. It's a swanky new glass building, and it's a beautiful campus, honestly. So we're pretty excited to host our speakers, many of whom are alumni of our business school.
Oh, really?
So they have never seen this building before. So we're excited to host them in this new space.
So what is the process for developing an outline for a conference of such an important nature? Talk about planning and logistics involved in creating the framework for this conference.
Sure. I'm sure Karthik, you can add to this, but Karthik and I are the chairs of the conference. So the two of us have been at least planning out the roadmap since March 2022. So it's been almost a year now. And we onboarded a team of further, like I said, about 20-25 individuals. These are all volunteers from the business school, first and second year students who have put their time and energies together to help us, one, put together a lineup of speakers of who will be speaking at the business school relevant to the themes that we think are emerging and pressing given today's climate. Two, just the logistics behind it. What does it take to book the rooms, to fly speakers in, get the right moderators for these kind of events, and set up the agenda and things like that. And three, ensuring that we're reaching the right audience who will benefit from this platform. While students at the business school and Columbia at large are meant to benefit from these discussions, this is also open to the broader Indian diaspora in New York and areas around New York.
I think the one thing, I completely agree with everything Suvarna said. The one thing that I would sort of add is also, I think you have to be really open to change, because a lot of things that you initially plan, they don't necessarily turn out the way, you want them to. So I think a lot of panels that we had initially thought about, a lot of speakers, a lot of, certain topics that we wanted to touch upon, those didn't really work out because you have a lot of like last minute churn that happens. These are incredibly busy individuals. They're taking time out to fly all the way from India. So it's very important that you are constantly adaptable, you constantly keep changing, and you constantly keep reacting well.
So this event actually turned you guys into event planners as well.
Maybe one day in the future, full-on professional event organizer.
Absolutely. So tell me, India is on the brink of a transformation that could dramatically shift the power balance in Asia over the next decade. What challenges or obstacles India needs to tackle and overcome to achieve that? What was the idea behind the theme of this year's conference, or the phrase rewiring?
I think there's a lot of global macro uncertainty, right? And there are multiple reasons you can think about why there's a global macro uncertainty. You have the Russia-Ukraine war, you have incredibly high interest rates, You have a certain portion of the world that doesn't necessarily want to keep their supply chains within China or within certain other emerging markets and wants to move it into India. So the idea here is to talk about how Indian businesses are adapting to that uncertainty. How are they thinking about moving ahead in the future? And is the country's policy architecture, is the country's economic architecture sort of geared up to meet those challenges, to meet that future actually? So that's why we wanted to get together some of the brightest minds, particularly in energy transition, fund managers, and talk about where is India heading.
Very interesting.
Exactly, and just to add to that, our themes in general we have 4 of them. So one is, of course, the investing angle of what this all means, the venture capital space and how that is evolving. The third is energy transition, and the fourth is entrepreneurship, because we've seen a lot of build up there.
You have some very interesting topics on proposed panels, like you were just mentioning. Enlighten our audience on that. How did you come up with those panels? Which ones are your personal favorites besides private investment and venture capital, since you are MBA students?
It's like, I guess it's like asking to choose between your children and saying that, who's your favorite child. All panels are very dear to us. I can maybe briefly touch upon why we decided to have the venture capital and the private investment panel. The idea there is to look at a fund manager's perspective, right? Like globally speaking, if you look at global capital, it's flowing increasingly into India. A lot of capital is getting diverted from some other emerging markets and is starting to come into India. So it's important to gather together the fund manager's perspective and discuss what is making India an attractive investment destination for them as compared to some other emerging markets, and even in its own strength. Right? And what are the unique challenges associated with investing into India? So those were 2 topics that we, venture capital and private equity, that we really sort of wanted to touch upon.
And to add to that, with energy transition and what does it take to be net zero in the future, that's a big topic that's confronting any economy, whether developing or developed. And India has huge strides that it has taken, whether in the form of corporates that are going towards the net zero path or new businesses that are going along that path. So we have panelists who will represent both parts to this as to what does it take to be on that journey. So that's one reason why we're super excited about building that energy panel. And my personal favorite is actually the entrepreneurship panel. One big reason is 3 out of our 4 panelists are women, and I love to see strong women who are leading unicorn businesses actually be there and speak to our audience about it. And these are young people who have set up their businesses from the ground up, and I think it's going to be an exciting
You have some
discussion to
ideas
watch.
about doing that yourself, I guess.
Maybe in future, let's see. But it's nice to see people who could potentially be your role models in future.
Coming back on energy, India, I would say, the task is like, or the date they've proposed, or the year is like 2070. That's like so long in the future.
I'm
Compared
sorry, I don't
to-
think I can comment on this
Okay.
particular topic. It's not a content specific that we would be able
Okay,
to
I can
comment
just
on.
scrape
Yeah.
that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you think the US will benefit the most from the progress in India?
I think, look, a lot of global capital, right, like it centers in the US, right? So, you can pick up the biggest venture capital funds on the planet, the biggest private equity funds, public market funds. A lot of them sit outside of the US even today. So the more and more India grows, the more and more you have companies within India growing, the more and more the capital markets in India tend to get deeper and deeper. The global capital is going to flow from the US into India. And I think it's going to strengthen the already very strong existing relationship that's there between both of these countries. And I think briefly, as I touched upon earlier, I think as the world maybe is looking for a pivot away from China or from some other emerging markets, India can sort of take that place as well. So I think there's a very strong linkage that is being created between US and India, particularly as India keeps on growing.
Do you have anything to add there? You covered it.
Great. How were the key speakers at your conference chosen? Who are your personal favorites and why? We've already heard from Suvarna, of course, the women who are going to be there and talking about entrepreneurship. How about you?
I think for us, as I always say, all of them we are very proud to have each of our speakers.
All of them are your children.
We are very proud. We are very proud of the opportunity to host some of these incredible names. I think in terms of the keynotes, I can very briefly highlight. We have Mr. Nikesh Arora, who's the CEO of Palo Alto Networks, which is a Fortune 500 company. He's going to be coming. We have Mr. Vivek Pandit, who's the global private equity lead of McKinsey. He's going to be talking about the Indian economy. We have Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal, who's the member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council and has helped put together some of the most important economic policies in the country in the last few years. He's going to be coming and giving the policy perspective, that I think is very crucial for a conference like this. And on top of that, as I think Suvarna and I already talked about, we have panels on energy, private equity, on venture capital, and on entrepreneurship. So we have a lot of exciting names within that as well.
Wow. Tell me, now this is more like a personal question. Many parents in India have been driven by a passion to see their children do well in their studies abroad in the US. Given the boost that the Indian economy has experienced, I'm very curious to know how the middle class and other members of society have altered their perspectives of America as a whole. Talk about the reason that your parents sent you both to the United States to study.
I'll start.
You can start.
Sure. So I think there is no doubt that the US is a very competitive economy even today. It's still the number one economy by pretty much any metric you want to use. So I think the pool of opportunities that exists within the country are very, very high. Now, as far as I personally go, I came to the United States around 2013, about 10 years ago. Yeah. So at the time, the pool of opportunities within India was not necessarily as high. But I would say that now increasingly going forward, and every year I think that gap has started to narrow. When it comes to opportunities within India, when it comes to the kind of I guess even the salary compensation that is there in a US white collar job versus in an Indian white collar job, that gap has started to narrow. And in India, the kinds of companies that you're now starting to see, they are companies that are not just companies that do outsourcing, but companies that are actually built on products, companies that are built on intellectual property development. So I think there's a lot more of an incentive to now go back to India or to do a career in India, which I guess wasn't really there back in 2013.
Do you plan to go back?
Well, for now, that's the plan.
Oh.
I've recently come to the US actually. I worked in New Delhi for about 4.5 years before I came to the business school. So I have a very good understanding of what it means to be in corporate in India. And I think one of the bigger reasons why people choose to do their MBA in the US is because it's one of the places where MBA was foundationally built, and it originated here. The concept of an MBA is from the US. So I think the idea for a lot of parents now is to send their kids to get that holistic world perspective and then figure out for themselves what works best. I think in terms of opportunities, the US is still very, very lucrative. But that being said, if you are interested in certain sectors where India is growing a lot, I think it can offer a lot of good job opportunities across the board.
Like, for example?
I think the stuff that you're talking about.
I
right?
think it's pretty much secular growth, right?
Okay.
Like if you look at the kind of companies that we are seeing, you're seeing it across consumer, across fintech, across SaaS. Like Indian companies are truly going global, right? You have brands like Oyo Rooms, for example. You have brands like Zerotha. Like people, recognize these names. So I think the growth is somewhat, for lack of a better word, it's secular rather than concentrated on any one area. And I think that's one of the topics we want to discuss in the conference is how secular and how broad-based that growth is.
Do you think, in the light of recent fireworks that started off with the Hindenburg report, the credibility of India is challenged in terms of investing and business partnerships? As a student, would you or other students that you might know want the air to be cleared on that with the expert panel that is coming in for the conference?
We'll fully focus upon just business topics.
Okay.
We're trying our best to not have any individual focused conversations.
How could this conference benefit Indian and American students alike? What are the implications of taking part in it?
As an audience member, I think there are two big benefits. One is you do not see all of these names in the same room on any average platform out there. These are individuals who do speak. They do have very public personas, but it's always going to be a niche topic, and then you don't really see how it all comes together and them speaking about broad-based, high-level topics for you to be able to go into a conference one day and be pretty up to date with what's happening in India is a pretty unique opportunity. So I think one, you get to hear from these names in one day and get a good download on what's happening back home. And the second is that we are creating networking opportunities during the day for individuals to be able to go up to these speakers and actually interact with them. And not just with these speakers, but with students of the business school and faculty and the other staff members who will be there. So it's a great opportunity to see the campus, meet people there, and just expand your network within the South Asian community. I would say that's at least from the audience standpoint.
Do you have any workshops planned or any breakout sessions?
We do have some breakout sessions that will happen. We have a networking session right in the middle of the day between sessions that will encourage more, just intermingling between the audience members and the guests. And we have a cocktail event in the evening.
Yep.
So
Looking forward
That's
to that.
exciting. I can come for that.
Please,
please
definitely.
do.
So before we wrap up this interview, why don't you tell our audience how they can be part of it or be involved, especially if they're students, and how they can support it?
The most important thing for us is please do attend. We have Instagram pages, we have LinkedIn pages. Please attend, and most importantly, please come in, please ask questions, please help spread the word around. We are 2 weeks out. We would love to have as much of the diaspora as we can. This conference, as Suvarna already touched upon, it's for everybody. It's not just for Columbia students, it's for everyone. There's something in it for everyone.
Absolutely. 25th of March, 2023. Go to ibccolumbia.org to buy your tickets. And we'd be more than happy to see students and members of the diaspora there.
So thank you so much, Suvarna and Kartik, for this very exciting and enlightening chat. All the best for your Indian Business Conference.
Thank you, Nidhi.
Thank you so much for hosting us.
Pleasure having you guys.